Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Wednesday, January the 8th, 2025, and today we're going to discuss how much time to spend marketing your farm in specific ways, tool management, and soil tests for deep compost mulch. So let's do it. All right. Well, happy Wednesday, everyone, because that's a normal thing people say. We did ultimately lose power for a bit yesterday, as I'd kind of threatened we would all week. And basically, the snow and ice is not going to melt anytime soon, so it could happen again today or tomorrow as icy limbs give up and fall on our power lines. So again, if at some point you don't see a show at the normal time, then you can blame the ice. Bet you never thought you'd know so much about the weather in Kentucky, but here we are. Okay, so we're going to do a full-on question day here and continue to get caught up on some of those questions from 2024. Diving right in, this question comes from Patreon member Mike at Think Little Farm. Mike writes, quote, Farmer Jesse, I know many of your videos touch on the topic of good marketing, specifically at markets, and understanding that starting a farm is, in fact, starting a new business. I'm wondering if you'd consider a video in which you detail how much time you spend doing actual farm marketing, thinking here specifically in terms of photography, social media posting, interacting with other like accounts on Instagram and such, not counting YouTube videos in the podcast, and what you think defines good marketing on those platforms. What do you do that works? Farm on? Okay, this is a great set of questions, Mike, and marketing has changed over the years based on our sales outlets. Now, I should qualify this by saying that I do not have a business degree. I'm not the Mr. Business suit and tie slick marketing guru type. I'm more like the grizzled old dude sitting at the end of the bar who cut his teeth in the marketing battlefields of early social media in the 2010s. So it's from that perspective that I'll answer these questions. And if anyone has any other input, feel free to chime in, because I do not, nor will I ever have a monopoly on all the good advice or good experience. But I like sharing what I know. So first, your sales outlets will dictate a lot about your marketing strategy and how much time and energy you should dedicate to it. For us, when we were doing a CSA, it was significantly more important to be marketing ourselves all year round, gaining a following and building on that, than it was when we switched to primarily farmers markets. If we were running an online store or a farm store, it would be the same thing. Anytime you are asking a customer to go out of their way to buy something from you, especially where competition is involved, marketing isn't just a thing you should do. It's basically essential. And it's in those situations where if you are not good at marketing, at taking photos and promoting yourself, you need to dedicate some energy to either learning the craft or having an employee do that task, or occasionally paying like a consultant or somebody to help you out. And in terms of how much time you're spending for that particular setup, to market yourself to like a CSA or whatever, you're talking 15 to 20 minutes every day, at least the equivalent of that, taking photos, posting to Instagram or Facebook, which have higher conversions generally than things like TikTok or X, but maybe that has changed or will change, and especially writing emails. Email lists are highly valuable still because they have an excellent conversion rate. People open their emails more than they read a Facebook post. Now, if you were doing something less reliant on a bulk number of customers going out of their way to purchase your product, such as going to farmers markets where you are selling and marketing simultaneously, your online marketing is less important than your in-person marketing, signage, presentation, personal connection, organic certification, etc. For retailers, building some consistent brand recognition is a good idea, because if people come to their store to buy your product, the retailer will buy more from you. So focusing slightly more perhaps on the brand in your marketing than the farm or the story is likely to be more effective. Don't neglect the farm story. If every post is just a picture of a label, you're not going to get much, if any, interaction. But just make sure the brand is featured regularly. Remember, just to use this as an example, people do not generally just stop what they're doing to go buy a car because they saw an ad for one. What the advertisers want to do is to make sure you see that ad right around the time you do decide you need a car, so their brand is the first one you think of. Also, people need nudging, which is why repetition is key. A likely customer may not be in a physical or mental space to purchase a CSA when they see your ad for it the first time, but maybe by the third or fifth time, they're just coming off of a conversation with their partner about wanting to eat better, and boom, they sign up. Or maybe they are at the local grocery store and see your brand on the shelf. Oh, I love this farm. I follow them on Instagram. Boom, sale. Restaurants are somewhat different. They may like you to have social media presence, so they can tag you on their own media or maybe use pictures from your farm or whatever. Being online may even lead them to you. They may be able to see your photographs and want to support your farm, or see something specific that you're selling and think, oh, I need that artichoke or whatever it is you grow. If you're not a photographer, I recommend hiring one. We used to trade vegetables to a photographer for family and farm photos every summer, and that was a great deal for us. And those photos could be a full month or more of fodder, plus great stuff for more long-term uses like on a website. That said, cell phones are pretty good these days and can pretty much take like the most perfect photograph without any adjusting or knowledge of lighting or any of that stuff. So anyway, fun question, Mike, and I will happily talk more about marketing and time, because I didn't even talk about hitting the ground or printing flyers or any of the other things that we've done to promote our CSA. So I may dedicate a whole segment to that soon, because I think marketing gets underappreciated. And I basically do it every day in one capacity or another. So let me know what additional thoughts or questions you all have. And like Mike sort of alluded to there in the question, YouTube and podcasting and that sort of stuff it doesn't really factor into my farm stuff. It's generally not going to be the key to marketing on a small scale, on a local scale. If you're trying to scale up, a national audience and brand recognition is a whole other monster. So that's where something like having a YouTube channel or having, I don't know, a lot of popularity could be good for your brand. But on a local basis, probably not as good of a use of time. All right, up next, let's talk about spreading tools around the farm, BRB. Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Harnois Greenhouses. Harnois Greenhouses has pioneered controlled environment agriculture since 1965, partnering with market gardeners and farmers across North America to deliver turnkey greenhouse solutions. Their unwavering mission is to support growers' success through innovation and expertise in design, manufacturing, and installation. Harnois Greenhouses are engineered to withstand high wind and snow loads, providing optimal brightness, increased yields, rapid ROI, and long-lasting durability. With over 20,000 projects completed, they are more than a manufacturer. They are a trusted partner. Their structures foster sustainable, energy-efficient ecosystems that drive profitable, resilient agriculture. In 2025, Harnois is introducing a new low-tech, high-tunnel model starting at just $2 per square foot, offering open field growers an accessible entry into controlled environment agriculture. Harnois Greenhouses, leading the way in turnkey solutions for local growers. Learn more at harnois.com. That's HARNOIS.com. All right, back to the show. I'll bet some of you can probably recite this by heart by now, but anyway, if you, the listener, are enjoying this content, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/notillgrowers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to those Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes from Patreon member Madeline Blair, who writes, quote, "Jesse, I look forward to listening to the podcast every day. I love the topics that you're covering are extremely relevant, but often don't get covered because they won't fill up 1+ hour segment on a typical farm podcast." Thanks, Madeline. They go on, one question I have is small tool storage, like delicate snips for tomato pruning and harvest knives, things I don't want to throw on the shelf with hand trowels. Do you have any recommendations, or have you seen any cool storage methods at other farms? End quote. Okay, so great questions, Madeline. The simple answer here is just to hang stuff up, which can be as simple as a drill bit with some twine. Depending on what the handle is made of, you can simply drill a small hole through the center of the top of the handle, pull some string through it, tie it in a loop, and then you can hang that up on a pegboard or eye hooks or just on a nail somewhere convenient, where, of course, somebody won't run into it. If the handle is metal, you would either have to get a metal drill bit or simply go around the handle, like just not drilling a hole, but just tying a loop around the handle and then tying that onto things. I drilled holes in all of my harvest knives, just holes, no strings added, so they could hang between the pack shed and our gardens. And that means I can just snag one on my way to the fields and then hang it up on my way back. For smaller things too, when it comes to having what you need, where you need it, the north side of a high tunnel makes a good storage location to hang small tools like that, just inside on the frame where they won't be blocking any sunlight. And that way you have them where you need them. In fact, funny enough, our friends over at Swift Blocker, who make the main soil blocker that I use, sent me a new thing they're working on, which is basically a metal pegboard of sorts. with special hooks, and it kind of just sinks right onto a T-post. Like you can put it right over a T-post really easily. Now, this is a product that's not released yet, but I believe will be coming out soon, and not a sponsorship. They just sent me one to get my feedback on it. But anyway, in theory, you could have a few stands like these around the farm with small hooks and just hang those tools and maybe like a hoe or something, small pruning scissors or whatever else you're using right where you need them. I tried working with a fanny pack for a while, but that just wasn't quite for me. Not the way I looked. I mean, I looked awesome, but it just physically didn't fit around my waist very well. It was super uncomfortable. That said, I do know growers who have those fanny packs where they just carry a bunch of tools and things like rubber bands around with them. Our old employee Greg used to have a fanny pack that he would wear just for harvest that had rubber bands and all sorts of stuff that he needed. I guess you get used to it, I imagine. For me, I was often also just kind of forgetting to put the fanny pack on. Or I would take it off somewhere random and suddenly found myself looking for my fanny pack to find the tool that was in the fanny pack that was supposed to keep me from having to search for it. So for my brain and my systems, it wasn't always the best. However, it could work for somebody else because searching for tools is a huge time suck on the farm. Things need a place and they need to be returned to that place. In the kitchen, we called this mise en place, to put in place, or as it's often translated, everything in its place. I know it's not exactly what you were asking about, but I find that loading my wheelbarrow with every tool I need for a project helps ensure that all the tools get returned every day. I load them, I take them to the field, I use them, I load the tools back up again, bring them back and replace them in the shed where they go. Small tools can be tougher because they also are easier to lose. Also, our kids absolutely love things like trowels. I cannot keep a trowel to save my life. There is some alternate dimension where missing socks and trowels battle it out for territorial control somewhere. But anyway, I hope that was at least mildly helpful. Definitely the perfect question for this show, Madeline. Thank you. Anyway, up next, deep compost mulching and soil testing. So be right back. Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Peaceful Heritage Nursery. If you're looking for hardy and resilient fruit trees, berry plants, or pawpaw trees, then check out Peaceful Heritage Nursery. Peaceful Heritage Nursery LLC is a mail-order nursery shipping premium quality fruit trees and berry plants across the USA. They specialize in resilient, non-GMO plant genetics for small growers. Their diverse selection includes berries, cold hardy figs, passion fruit, gumi, mulberry, and much more. They're famous for their diverse selection of premium quality grafted pawpaw trees. 5-star Google ratings and customer testimonials attest to their commitment to excellence in quality and service. Find them at peacefulheritage.com and join their mailing list. Once again, find them at peacefulheritage.com. Use the promo code NOTILL, all caps, one word, for 10% off your first order. All right, back to the show. All right, so continuing on, busting out some questions here for this Wednesday. Patreon member Chris asks, quote, when you deep compost mulch, how do you take the soil sample for soil tests? Do you try to go below the compost and test there, or test the compost? A combination. I know you're planning to do an in-depth conversation on soil tests at some point. Hopefully you can spend a bit talking through this detailed then, end quote. Okay, so great question. I think we can kind of tackle it now. Indeed, I will do multiple soil testing shows over the course of, well, forever, that will talk about each one, what I like about them or what the differences are. There is no one right way to do soil testing on deep compost mulch, but generally speaking, what I've done in the past, assuming you were talking about established beds and not beds before compost is added, which is usually when I would take a sample before I add the compost, balance it, and then add the compost. But anyway, let's assume all that is done. What I try to do is I try to take the sample of the native soil and not include any of the compost, at least in the first 2 years. This is because the layers of compost I've used, yes, plant roots will penetrate them and grow in them, but they are only a few inches deep. So most of the growing is done in the native soil. Over time, it will be harder to tell what is what because the compost will slowly integrate with the native soil, and differentiating between what is native soil and what is compost will become more difficult. But in the first year or so, you can sort of scrape the compost back and just take your sample 6 to 8 inches or however deep you want to go. Just be consistent every year. Then brush off the chunky compost particles and sample that. The test will give you a better idea of how the soil organic matter is increasing or decreasing, if there are any significant imbalances, and depending on the type of test you are taking, how the microbial populations are holding up, soil respiration, diversity, etc. Deep composting is notably going to completely render your chemical soil tests bizarre. It just is. Compost is loaded with nutrients, and thus your phosphorus is likely to be off the charts depending on the type of compost you used. Your nitrogen could be high, but it could also be low if you used really chunky compost. To be honest with you, it is really hard to dial in nutrient levels in deep compost mulching systems like in situ, especially at first, but that's also because the compost is intended to help provide all the requisite plant nutrients. However, how I have come to think of deep compost mulching is as more of a garden establishment technique and less of a continual gardening approach. The idea is that it will suppress weeds and replenish soil organic matter so long as you are following all the other soil health principles of keeping the soil planted, covered, and undisturbed as much as possible. And then slowly the compost mulch will integrate and you can start adding smaller, more targeted compost and or rock mineral applications. So as the compost breaks down, you can start incorporating every layer from the surface down 8 or so inches in your soil test and start dialing the soil health that way. Anyway, not knowing what your goals are, because maybe you just need a soil test like I did to satisfy our organic standards and not so much to quote unquote balance the soil, but maybe you also want to use it to improve production or understand why production is not where you want it. Increasingly, agronomists are becoming more savvy to this method of production, so it's possible they could have more insight on how to proceed or even how they would like for you to take the soil tests. Like some may want you to sample the compost and then sample the soil and then give you some consultation that way. Others may want a combination because that's largely what your plants are growing in. I can't speak for them. I don't know. So if you have a test in mind, it wouldn't hurt to just give that specific lab a shout and see what they think. For me, if you go straight through the compost, you will get kind of a skewed sample because your soil organic matter and nutrient levels will be absolutely outrageous, but your microbial populations will not be indicative of what is actually around the rhizosphere, depending on how much compost you added. The rhizosphere is generally closer to 4 to 8 inches down, but I account for a couple inches with the compost mulch because that first 2 or 3 inches is pretty dry. Anyway, I hope that is a bit helpful in terms of how to actually take the sample. More on soil testing in the near future because it's just about that time of year for us. But also it's a fascinating subject and there's always new research coming out. So it's fun to explore. When I first started asking agronomists about this several years ago, they really disliked the idea of adding compost as a mulch, but they had different recommendations for how to test. So like I said, you may want to communicate with them. So I give you mine. And again, your lab may have a different preference. For now though, I'm going to call that a show. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music and the team at No-Till Growers for all their support. Pick up a copy of the Living Soil Handbook or The Seed Farmer by Dan Brisebois over at notillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or sign up in the month of January, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to, we just got one, Jason Soups. You'd think I'd go superhero with this one, but I think I'm going to go more with like it's a TV series about a crime-fighting farmer who fights crime with the things that they grow. So it's kind of like MacGyver meets Old MacDonald. That's the tagline. Anyway, we'll see if we get more names for a story tomorrow. But otherwise, thank you all for listening and or watching. We will see you and or hear you. You hear me. Anyway, we'll see you tomorrow. Bye.